the manosphere, there are various theories on why uncledom persists in the modern age. Some say it's based primarily on physical characteristics such as appearance and height, while others say it's a mix between economic and political factors, alongside changing demographic population as the main reason. While I believe each of these theories brought up play a role, I don't believe any of these theories are the primary factor of causing uncledom. My name is Black Panomi, and I want to talk about what I think are the three main reasons that cause uncledom in the modern age, for men ages between 18 and 30. The first reason I believe what causes uncledom is the adverse childhood experience. Jada Creepin summarized the adverse childhood experience. I'll play it for you now.
I'm also going to assume that the majority of us went through many adverse childhood experiences, meaning that when we were younger and during our formative years, a lot of us were most likely bullied and teased at school or abused at home in some way, shape, or form. And I'm going to assume that these things didn't happen once or twice, that they were repetitive, that it happened many more times. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, they did a study, and the study was called an Adverse Childhood Experience Study, ACE study. It was done in Great Britain, the UK, and it was a longitudinal study, so they followed people into their 60s, and they started following them when they were younger. These people were all bullied and abused in some way, shape, or form, many times as youth. And they found without fail that people that experienced these adverse childhood events were affected negatively in the future as adults every time. So one definitely causes the other. In terms of relationships in this group of people, this cohort of people that they followed, with men, what they found was the problem wasn't that they couldn't find the right partner, it's that they couldn't find a partner. Now, these guys in this subgroup obviously had mood and anxiety disorders and behavioral problems. That's what the problem was, that stemmed from their abuse. And it basically equated to them, their love life being destroyed.
As you saw in the information on screen about the adverse childhood experiences, keep in mind that it's not a set in stone thing to be permanently negatively affected by them. It's more of a statistical likelihood that you will be affected. Think back on your childhood and think to yourself, was I ever a victim? And if so, did any of those experiences shape me into the person I am today? The second reason I believe is because of genetic temperament traits such as introversion as well as social autism. As a quick rundown, introversion is when you tend to withdraw from social settings, and extroversion is when you favor them. Introverts get easily overwhelmed by environmental stimuli, making socialization harder than it is for extroverts. Because of introversion, as a person you're unable to live in the moment in a social setting, causing you to fall behind your peers in terms of social achievements. It's harder to make friends, and the friends you do make are likely introverts themselves. And if you do manage to be part of an extroverted social group, you'll end up developing imposter syndrome within the group, coming from my own first-hand experiences. Unfortunately, you're born as one or the other, but studies have recently shown that temperament can be changed with proper help and encouragement at an early age. More details on that on the third and final reason. Now let's talk about social autism. When I say social autism, I don't mean full-blown life-debilitating autism seen in such notable figures as Christian. I mean, when you have trouble socializing because you have a neurological development disorder. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, I don't have autism, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. However, think of autism as a spectrum. Look at this picture of neurotypical personality traits. Can you honestly say that you can describe yourself as neurotypical? Do you get into relationships easy? Let me ask you this, are you able to make small talk with women and make it sound interesting? How self-conscious are you when you socialize? Socialization is supposed to come off as natural, and the more you're self-aware about your inability to socialize, the worse you're off. If you're like me, you tend to overthink things, sometimes fumbling your words, or getting really nervous. Sometimes you panic about what to say next, leading to awkward silences, or when you do say something, it doesn't come out like how you intended to, like it did in your head. Sometimes even failing to get your point across because of a misunderstanding. Women can pick up on these social behaviors, and it's not a trait that they're looking for in a partner. Take a look at the spectrum chart again, and try to figure out where you think you belong. The third and final reason, and what I believe to be the main reason behind uncledom, is not being taught how to properly socialize at an early age. If you take any bit of information from this video, take this next piece of information to heart. From an early age, your parents should have helped develop your social skills. I'm talking super early, from like the ages between 2 and 4 in your formative years. The early adoption of socializing your child is such an important milestone that I'm sure many Oinklers today miss that fundamental key development and were never able to adapt to their lives without it. Without early socialization, people end up having difficulties later on making friends and functioning properly in social settings. But I hear you saying, I had friends in middle school and high school. Well, answer me this, were they mostly primarily males? Were they mostly made up of other losers dudes who couldn't get girlfriends either? Earlier in the video, I brought to attention how introversion and social autism plays a huge role in causing uncledom. Did you know that with early intervention, you can help correct both these issues before it becomes too late? Once the negative effects of both these characteristics take hold, it is nearly impossible to undo the damage. Ironically, the best cure in both these issues is the preventative, is to not let these issues spiral out of control. The question to ask is, was this malicious intent by your parents? No, obviously. If you ask anyone, would you like your son to be an oinkler for the rest of his life? The vast majority of them would say no. They were unaware of this information, and unfortunately you have to pay the price for it. If you were born in the 90s or early 2000s, you might have had an upbringing similar to mine in where you were primarily raised by television and video games. It was easier to sit your child in front of a TV or a computer instead of actually parenting. Also, probably most of your socializing in your formative years was very sparse besides kids in the elementary school, which is very bad because most kids at that age are assholes. Because they understand at a base instinct there is a social hierarchy, and displaying some sort of dominance, like early bullying, to less socialized kids is common. If I could make an analogy, I would describe early socialization as the building blocks your parents were supposed to place to turn you into a successful person in life. You know that arcade game Stacker, where you stack the blocks to the top of the screen to achieve a prize? That is metaphorically what each and every one of us has gone through, some more successful than others. The problem is when parents place those blocks poorly, or nothing at all. You can't undo the damage. You can't unbake a baked cake. If you still think that everything I talked about in this video is nonsense and that I don't know what I'm talking about, I want to bring up an extreme example of everything I've been talking about. Elliot showed symptoms of everything I talked about so far. He suffered from the adverse childhood experience, as mentioned by the neglect and abuse by both his parents in his upbringing. He's extremely introverted and displayed obvious signs of social autism. His parents didn't even attempt to correct these problems early. He was raised by video games instead of socializing with his peers. In the modern age, you cannot afford to be introverted or socially autistic. Animals in the wild with poor socialization skills are often shunned by the herd and are more likely to be killed by predation. They are less likely to pass down their genes, and humans are no different. Just swap killed by predation with killed by depression. I'm going to play a clip of Thomas White in first to end the video. Enjoy.
So you're going to have a lot of people who are deficient in socialization. The problem is,
which is essential for human existence, frankly.
Here's the thing: is it can't be like, the locust in the black pill sphere are really the biggest optimists because they're talking about things that can be changed. And it's like, okay, you're gonna do this. You're gonna do double jaw surgery. You're gonna do the rhinoplasty. You're gonna do X, Y, Z. You have your weird tablets. You have your Indian pharmacy shit. You have like this experimental like Soviet banned like human growth hormone you're gonna order from like Tajikistan. Whatever. Okay. So those are things they're available, they're physical, they can be attained, that you could ship them, you could do the surgery, the bone can be shaved, removed. Okay, it can. So there's a chance, it's possibility, it's physical reality. But the thing is, if you had an adverse high school experience, if you had an adverse school experience, there's no like you can't go back. You can't go back. You can't go back to 13 and go back into like middle school. You can't go back and like relive all that. You can't. Once the damage is done, or once you've been lonely that whole time, you're gonna be deficient, and there's no like there's no camp to send you to.
There's not enough
Socialize?
emphasis in the now, living in the now, and this is your life.
No.
Live. They're trying to wait or it's
but okay,
I have
but like
time for later.
I see this issue. I see this issue in the incel sphere. It's like, hey, people had a averse, people talk about adverse childhood experiences, and those are they can be very traumatic. They can ruin a person for life, and they can be irrecoverable, or they can damage like it would be very hard to work through them. And that's how if you trace back how most people become miserable in this life, it start with a childhood, of course. But what comes part two is their high school experience, their middle school experience, their school experience, primary, secondary, whatever you call it in whatever country. Once you enter that, that's the one place you're mandated to be. That's the one place everyone has to be, and you have to go through. Everyone go through it. They bond through it. It's like it's a ladder in life. But if your experience was averse, if you did not have a clique, if you were able to socialize, if you were bullied and picked on, if you were excluded, if you were invisible, how do you recover from that? That's the question. I don't what I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't have an answer. I see this as a really big problem. Like that I hear these stories. I hear hundreds of stories by now of men and who are incel usually that they had very bad high school experiences, and now they're kind of stunted because of that. How could they socially recover? Like, how could they have a good view on life? Like, what do I do? Send them in a time machine? Like, That's the big problem. Like once you're like desocialized, like from that critical period, that is the most critical period in life because it sets you to what you're going to be in the future. Um,
I
it's
just
not
think
it's
it's
not
not. I don't think.
irrecoverable. It
Well,
can
and
it can
first, I don't
be.
think it.
uh,
I don't think it's emphasized enough about your sort of that your coming of age and your high school years. That's sort of
it's
make or
not.
break time.